works is if I fix it in real time, if an idea comes to me, or there's some other. I wonder. Yeah. Sorry, this is going to make me crazy, right? Of course. Video. Now let's go. Alrighty, everybody. So how we doing? I always ask that. Nobody ever says anything. It's like it's like tradition. I have to ask. I do care, and I wish we had a lot more one-on-one kinds of time. It's a lot more fun. Let me drop the link for the current stream. It's just more boring without my artwork. Yeah. So okay, first item. While I'm pulling up this, let me drop. I'm going to drop this link on you in the Discord chat. Yeah, I'm glad you liked my little meme. I thought it was relevant to our man. We got to talk about logical fallacies, but what I really want to talk about is Whoopi Goldberg and Joe Rogan. That's what I really want to talk about, just because it's you can't make this stuff up. It cannot be scripted. The stuff that we're talking about, like technology, right? What are the technologies at play, and what are the dynamics, and cancel culture, and censorship, and freedom of speech, and freedom of ideas, and especially, yeah, here I go. Some of you are like, oh, here we go. We're never going to get to logical fallacies. No, but it's just the thing about 305G. Since I kind of re-instantiated it and then launched it here at UVU, it's like every week. You don't even have to like look a semester ahead. It's just like every week there's just something really relevant popping, and it's technology, and it's the intersection of technology, society, ethics, global. It's all of those things, and one of the things I'm really trying to you know just induce you, I guess. Um, inspire in you is just a little bit of thinking, and like we talked about, let's revisit some of our ground rules: respect, dignity. Chuck can be wrong. Chuck might be wrong all the time, and we just know that. And you can be wrong all the time, and right. I think we're all right some of the time. That's critical, and that we all understand that. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Just first of all, any thoughts? Any thoughts on those? If you're following the news at all, you know, what are the offenses? I'll give you the offenses as I sort of perceive them. For Whoopi Goldberg, it's making what I think is a really boneheaded. I don't know what her motivation was for saying it, but I think it's boneheaded, which was that the Holocaust was not about race. I think I think it nudges up against Holocaust denial. I think it borders on it. It's not the same thing. And I don't want to bring Godwin's law into play, but I do think that I do think it's a very, very boneheaded and insensitive thing to have said. Um, and from my perspective, she apologized, and I'm good. You know, I don't really like her. I don't like anybody, right? But I'm good. We could also get into Rudy Giuliani on the Masked Singer. That's anyway. Let's not even go there. But yeah, and I don't like that guy either. And as essentially, I don't like anybody. I like you, but that's Whoopi. But she's been suspended, and now there's a bunch of people that are like, cancel her. She should be done. She should be done for the rest of her life. And I don't agree. I also don't agree with most of what she says about anything. You know, So it's not like a shock to me that Whoopi said something I don't agree with. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And then Joe Rogan, whose thought crime. So that was Whoopi's thought crime. Joe's thought crime was having on the most popular podcast in the world, um, had on a couple of guests who are qualified scientists who differed on the mainstream narrative with respect to vaccines. You know, and I've listened to Rogan, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, and if the guest was interesting to me, and I find him to be reasonably articulate and intelligent, but not, I'm not going to count on Joe Rogan as my source for information, but I really just think he's trying to have decent conversations, which I think is what Whoopi's trying to do on The View, is have deeper, meaningful, conversations. Your mileage may vary as for how they're succeeding, but so then you have Neil Young, and I know some of you are like, Neil who? And Joni Mitchell, and you're saying Joni who? Essentially saying take Joe Rogan off of Spotify or take my music off of Spotify. Joe Rogan also apologized for certain things and agreed that Spotify offering information about, when there are sensitive topics, having additional information offered and a warning that says, hey, this program is about sensitive topics, be it, viewer discretion is advised or listener discretion is advised. But Joe also, apologized for misperceptions and for, whatever. I felt like they were both sincere apologies. So, this is the interesting question. Are you, a conservative anti-vaxxer who thinks Joe's, uh, apology should be accepted, but Whoopi's should not? Or are you, a sort of left-leaning The View fan who thinks Rogan should be canceled and Whoopi's apology, right, should be accepted? This is just Chuck's sort of check yourself before you wreck yourself. Um, just think about to what extent is your willingness to sort of accept an apology based upon ideology. That those on your team, you're good, and those not on your team, not good. Or you believe that your team has been historically treated inconsistently. So you're like, well, sure, cancel the hell out of Whoopi because the conservatives have been canceled. Is that really the answer as well? Does the pendulum have to swing, or can you just say, no, right is always right? Correct is always correct. I'm just a big fan of letting people apologize and move on. That's, as a radical centrist and as an independent, this is my radical perspective, is love and forgiveness and understanding, and take somebody at their word if they're willing to apologize. I assure you, the people that are really out there causing trouble, like really, really causing trouble, they're not apologizing for the things they say. But it's also reached a point where apologizing is almost like throwing chum in the water. It's almost like sign of weakness, and now you start a feeding frenzy. One philosophy is, when they come for you, do not apologize, because it just emboldens the mob. Okay, I'm going to read some comments, and then we're gonna do fallacies. Okay, let me just see, what do we got here. Um, yeah, so thank you, Andy, for the summary. Daniel, man, get educated or don't. Honestly, I used to be a big fan of, look, just educate the heck out of yourself, and anymore it's just like that fine line between being educated about what's going on in the world and just being sane. And I respect I respect a little ostrich algorithm myself if it keeps you sane and takes the anxiety down. Seriously, somebody just bails out of all of it, the news, social media, whatever, and says the heck with it. I have a hard time not respecting that perspective. I also have a hard time doing it. you know. Yeah, so Radioactive, a lot of artists are removing their music from Spotify in order to raise awareness of the issue. But I think what they're really doing is advertising Rogan's podcast. You can't buy this kind of advertising. You know what I mean? What were the words of Obi-Wan? If you strike me down, I will become more powerful. right? I think that's, how about how many of you, wait, I'm gonna put a survey. Okay, I'm gonna drop a survey. The survey is, um, I'm typing if you can't hear it. This is a yes no survey, okay? Have you heard about the banned book called Mouse? That's the survey question. Drop in there and drop a Y or an N. And then there's a related, I'm going to drop another survey. So for about half the class, okay, next survey. So about half the class has heard about this banned book called Mouse. Okay, it's a book. It's a children's book, middle school, junior high, illustrated book, and it is apparently. I don't know the. I mean, I don't. I only know of the book because it's been a lot of news about it. But it is apparently a book that teaches in a more accessible way about the Holocaust. And about the actual life experience, nonfiction experience of the author, and basically the characters are cats and mice. I don't know. I honestly I don't know if the Jews are mice and the Nazis are cats, or I don't know because I haven't seen the book. I haven't. I only know of it. So the question was, have you heard about the banned book Mouse? And a little more than half have not, still have not, and about a little less than half have heard of it. And then I asked if you had heard about it before it was banned in Tennessee, and about three-quarters of those that said yes had not heard about it before. So is that advertising or what? And only 3 of the 30 some, there we go. Thank you. Thank you. Forget it. Thank you for dropping that. Um, and that looks like the mice are Jews and the cats are Nazis. And yeah, thank you, Hunter. Godwin's law. No, but my point is, my point is, um, that book is now an Amazon bestseller, and I want to get my hands on. I want to read it. In fact, it's now been, and this was banned, I guess by a public school in Tennessee. I don't know. But again, it's back to that issue of what are you doing? What are you doing, Tennessee? And if your concern is with this book, I don't know. They may have just felt, giving them benefit of the doubt, that the subject matter was inappropriate for the age. That's a potentially reasonable rationale. But in any case, the headline reads, "This cartoon book, was banned." But what I read was that it was banned because of violence, nudity, nude cats and mouse, cats and mice, nude mice, the humanity. How we're all going to hell when it's all come down to banning nude mice. No, but I don't know. Again, my philosophy is try to give benefit of the doubt to the actors. I don't agree with that decision based upon what I know about it. I wouldn't agree with that. And in my own house, it's the kind of thing I would absolutely have available, at some, at an age when my children could maybe ask about it or be aware of it. And there is such a thing as age appropriate material. I don't know. I don't know. But in any case, when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to ban something to get rid of it because it's dangerous and a bad influence. Let me ask you, okay, I'm going again, more surveys. This is so much more fun than talking about logical fallacies. But isn't that fascinating that there were 14 of you, 15 um, that have heard about the book, and now of course all of you have because it's posted in the chat, you know. But 15 of you have heard about it, and 2/3 of that number uh, only heard about it since the book was banned in Tennessee. So taking the grand total of everybody, 35, it's about 40% of this population group became aware of the existence of 40% of our class population. Granted, we're a little more nerdy, a little more, techno connected than the general population. So granted, but you know what I mean? I think we're getting a lot more, uh, you know, I don't know, information flow maybe than somebody who only is older and only watches the evening news. But 40% of this population had the book Mouse advertised to them, essentially, by virtue of the banning by a Tennessee school board. You know, I think some of the best thing that could happen, if there's a march, of people that you really don't agree with, man, I think if it's a non-event, that's not a bad, if there's something reprehensible, you know, it's what if it's just a no-show? You know what I mean? Nobody shows up. They come, they march, they leave. It's not in the news. Nobody. It was not an event. Just did. I think that's not the best thing that can happen. In fact, some news sources have taken to, when there is like a mass murder or a shooting or something, where they won't publish the name of the perpetrator or perpetrators. In order to essentially for this exact same principle, they're trying to, not foster a copycat uh, shooting or event, right? Similarly, when people die of suicide, a lot of news sources won't say that they died of suicide. And I think again, there is a copycat thing where somebody's like a follower, a fan, or whatever, and that causes this certain wave. Not like people aren't going to find that out, but no. My next question was going to be, what was my next question was going to be? Hang on, I got to read the comments. Oh, here we go. Here we go. The question is, crap, man, what happened to my freaking Discord? My system. I should have rebooted it. Okay, next survey, and then I'm still going to get back to the comments. This one's a little dicier. I think that I don't know. We'll find it. We'll find it. The question is: had you heard of Neil Young before the Spotify controversy? I'm building this survey here still. Okay, there you go. Had you heard of Neil Young before the Spotify? Let me edit that. You can start your yes no on that, but I do need to before the Spotify controversy. Notice you can edit the lines in Discord just like you can in Slack. Okay. Next survey question. This, by the way, is one of the cool things I think about doing class remotely. The surveys are kind of fun. Had you heard of Joe Rogan before the Spotify controversy? Okay. So 15, about half the class had not heard of Neil Young. He's legend. He's a legendary musician, folk guy, obviously old, legendary, contemporary to my childhood. Matthew still hasn't heard. Matthew, you just heard. Come on, man, you're killing me. Um, oh, interesting. And almost all of you had heard of Joe Rogan before. That's fascinating. That is, I mean, literally 27-1 on the survey on had you heard of Joe Rogan before the Spotify controversy. Wow. So who wins more? Maybe Neil Young wins. Maybe it's good. Maybe Neil Young's, I'm not saying I really don't believe Neil Young is motivated, by popularity and greed. You know what I mean? Did you know Joe Rogan was a world championship black belt? Yes. Yeah, I did know that. And a mixed martial arts fighter. Kind of, I mean, Rogan at a, in the octagon, Rogan's a bit of a badass. I mean, there's, you know, um, yeah, yeah. Okay. And the real question is who remembers the fear factor? I became aware of it, saw what it was, and then just averted my eyes, by the way. I never went fear factor. I just was like, no, somebody just like with their face buried in worms or, yeah, no, no, that's the stuff of which nightmares are made. And I'm not interested. I'm too squeamish. So there. Okay. Let me keep scanning. Yeah, so Andy made, I'm backing up. Okay, I'm about 15 minutes back on comments right now. Spotify's been taking down podcasts for COVID misinformation, but they aren't taking down Rogan's, even though some might say he's crossing the line. No, it's an interesting question, right? Because the problem is that with every podcast that's ever been, going back to what Andy just said, you take every program, every podcast, everything, uh, and we're this kind of is a bit of a segue into logical fallacies. Sorry, Andy. But some might say he's crossing the line. That's a truism. Some might always. Some being one or more, right? If CNN has a report on COVID, don't you think there are some that are going to say they're crossing some line? You know what I mean? That they got it wrong. That's not right. I mean, you know, there's never going to be 100% consensus on anything. So that's the struggle, is because what I do like about Rogan. I mean, what makes me crazy about Rogan is I think he's articulate and he's a good interviewer and he gives his guests room to talk. But I also haven't been real like Mondo impressed with his own logical powers, I guess, maybe. Let me just put it that way, right? So I don't view Rogan as a source of information per se, but I believe he's a guy who's interested in saying, "Hey, here's another viewpoint." And what he said in his statement that he made was, "My goal is to just have interesting conversations with interesting people." And the people that he had talking about it were credentialed and qualified, from what I understood, but they just weren't consistent with mainstream narrative. But they weren't like, you know, who's the crazy guy, Jones. They weren't like, I don't know, from my perception they were credible people. And then this comes into this whole 1984 kind of issue: is are we really in a position where somebody gets canceled or attempted to be canceled for the thought crime of attempting to have a nuanced conversation in which opposing viewpoints are allowed to be aired? He wasn't posting. I don't perceive that he was, that he was, that they were radical. I don't know. My perception was that they were not radical ideas, but definitely out of the mainstream. But he wasn't even saying I agree with these guys, just saying, hey, let's see what they think. And I still think this program was predominantly guests talking about it in the mainstream. So, is there literally no tolerance? Where do you draw that line to when you say, here's the point at which we're going to draw that line, and if you cross that line, we can't even associate with you. We have to boycott. We have to cancel. You have to go away, and we have to force and make that happen. And we're going to be guilty by association. Back to what Radioactive said. Now a lot of artists are removing their music from Spotify in order to raise awareness of this issue. Yeah, and the challenge is, I don't know. I mean, based upon what I'm seeing, I put kind of Whoopi and Rogan in the same bucket. First of all, I don't know necessarily that Rogan crossed the line by allowing a conversation. I think Whoopi crossed the line by saying something patently false and patently offensive. I think offensive not just to Jews, but particularly to Jews. But I think what Whoopi said was flat out wrong and deserved an apology. With Rogan, I think his crime was having allowing conversation with people that I don't even think he agreed with necessarily. I don't know. I really don't know. Let me see. Silo said it's probably because an artist may want to take down the music, like David Crosby of Crosby, Stills and Nash actually spoke out in support of Neil Young, but said, "I don't control my music." At some point, artists will sell their catalog, and at that point, they don't control the music. They've already basically been compensated, but they don't control it. Yeah. Dave says, "Drama baby." Yep. Steve, now we're getting into it. No, and I want to just say, Steve, he was saying, genuinely curious about, ideology concerning COVID-19 versus ivermectin, which I didn't know what that was until the Rogan controversy. You know what I mean? And then now you're getting into like, I don't want to double click to go down there and actually argue the merits, because that's not my point. You can, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have that argument, that discussion. But I am saying I don't want to have it here. Does that make sense, Steve? Um, John, oh, shice. John said, now here's a question, John, and I mean this with no disrespect. What John said was, Joe Rogan convinced my family to forego the shot, and when my grandpa got COVID, they had ivermectin ready, which ended up killing him. So harsh feelings are working here. So all respect for the feelings, you know what I mean, and the emotions, right? And you know, and obviously, heartfelt, uh, you know, condolences for your grandpa. I guess my question is, and I'm going to just address, and again, I apologize. I don't mean this to be insensitive, but did he convince your family? Did Rogan himself convince your family? Was there a discussion that was allowed to happen? You know what I mean? Was he advocating and promoting it, or was he simply allowing a conversation? And again, John, please, I apologize, and please forgive me if this is in any way disrespectful in light of, the share about your grandpa. But I just want to say that's a very strong statement, you know, and and then again, what the byproduct is, right? But again, the feelings, that's you. You have the right to your own emotions and feelings about how all that fell out. But I just want to if you wouldn't mind sharing on that, because I don't know, because again, I don't regularly listen to Rogan. I have on occasion. Jake said, "What if we just stopped watching people who spread misinformation instead of canceling them?" Yeah, and the interesting thing, what the argument, Jake, I think that people make who are in favor of canceling them and essentially of censorship is what they're saying is dangerous. So they shouldn't have a platform in which to say it. You see the dilemma, right? Now take, for example, Neil Young. Neil Young has been a notorious pot smoker for about 50 years and has been a legalized marijuana advocate, right? I'm just taking an example of something that is legal in many states now, right? But wasn't for decades, for many, many decades. So during the time when Neil Young was outside of the mainstream on the discussion of legalizing marijuana, right? Because he was outside the mainstream, should he have had a platform? Should he have had a platform in the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s? Should we have said, no, Neil Young is outside the mainstream when it comes to pot, therefore, he should never be allowed to speak about that subject anywhere? I mean, I'm just trying to use that as an example, trying to, flip that, because there was a time that Neil Young was, advocating, supporting something that was very much outside the mainstream, and is now much more inside the mainstream. Depends on the state, depends on your, personal fallout, right? But do you see what I'm trying to say? Would Neil Young say it would have been okay? Because this is the problem. Like I said one of the other days, live by the sword, die by the sword. When you're okay deplatforming somebody because you disagree with what they're saying, are you okay if you're deplatformed because somebody disagrees with what you're saying? Are you okay with that just, kind of cutting? Because sometimes the great ideas are outside the mainstream. Sometimes the worst ideas are outside the mainstream. Sometimes The worst ideas are in the mainstream. And sometimes the best ideas are in the mainstream. So in other words, being in the mainstream here, okay, speaking of logical fallacies, this one's bandwagon, okay? Bandwagon. Just because everybody, just because the mainstream is of the opinion that, pick something that's been controversial over the decades, right? Legalizing pot, gay marriage. Pick any controversial topic that has been out of the mainstream and then back into the main, and then not back in, but then and then finally in the mainstream. And as long as we've already played Godwin's Law in Nazi Germany, obviously during World War II, starting in the 30s, Nazism was in the mainstream. It wasn't, then it was, then it wasn't. In other words, being in the mainstream has no bearing on the legitimacy of your argument. Does that make sense? So that by itself, that's the struggle. That's the struggle. Yeah. So there's a judgment call, and in my opinion, having conversation by itself shouldn't be punishable by cancellation. Expressing an idea shouldn't by itself be punishable by cancellation. I do think there are things like advocating certain things that I think we would but again, personal judgment. Personal judgment call about whether something is a really bad, dangerous idea and what you're willing to do to shut that down. I'm scrolling down, so I'm behind quite a bit. Radioactive, responding to John, said, that sorry to hear it, which I'm adding my heart on that one. These experiences, why this is such a big deal. Yeah. All right, I'm down to. All right, we're back down to the picture of mouse. Andy said, my personal opinion is that it's more of a Spotify problem than a Joe problem. Because Spotify's been taking down podcasts for misinformation. And I don't know anything about that. I'm not informed about that. You know what I mean? But they aren't taking down Joe's because they paid him like $100 million for the podcast. And even though Spotify executives agree that he's spreading misinformation. And again, I want to question that one, Andy, and back it up if if it's back upable, please back it up. Is he himself spreading information, or is having a conversation that, is it, what I'm trying to say? We're at the point where what is and isn't misinformation. Because that's also part of the dilemma. You know what I mean? And that's what kind of messes everything up. Drake Lord, just want to chime in, not necessarily banned, but dropped from the middle school curriculum. Fair enough. Dave said, I know some public and vocal anti-vaxxers with deceased family members from COVID. I just don't know where you go. Same here. Do you just get further entrenched, or do you modify beliefs? The people that I know just entrench. Dave, your mileage may vary. The people that I know generally entrench. Let me see. John, further clarification. I've been pro-vax through it all, but my family's further dug their heels into COVID misinformation and on being anti-vax. Makes it so much more frustrating and hurtful. Absolutely. I feel you. Dave asks, I wonder if the grief will hit many years down the road and they'll have to confront something they're just pushing down right now. Yeah, that's a good question. But I think this comes back to that issue we've been talking about giving room for ideas that aren't necessarily, your own idea. I think there's a lot of people, and I mean this, again, how I'm rolling across the political spectrum, that are entrenched in an idea, and when it's challenged, and even when it's bearing bad fruit, double down on the thing and find another way of sort of making that right in their minds. Because that was the predisposition. Again, let me drop out another recommendation. I just want to strongly recommend it. The Righteous Mind. If somebody wants to drop a link in the chat on that, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. I never know how to say his name. I have a hard time calling him Jonathan Haidt because it just sounds too hateful. Haidt. But The Righteous Mind is a really, really good book for inducing you to second guess, where your deeply held ideas come from, and can you get them out? Can you get a little objectivity about them? You know what I mean? Okay, I'm back down past the surveys, past MMA, past Fear Factor. Andreval apparently lives under a rock for not knowing about Joe Rogan. I mean, it is a popular podcast. It's an incredibly popular podcast. Matthew has heard of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Sort of knew who Neil Young was. Dave asked a question. So did an English teacher want to teach mouse as part of the curriculum? And the idea was right. That's another thing too. The headline reads Tennessee Band's book, right? And you said that Joe Rogan had Bob Lazar, the Area 51 guy, on. I would. Is that misinformation? Probably. For all we know. I don't know. Drake said part of the school that mouse was probably part of the school reading material because of parent pushback. Okay. Oh, John, thank you. John just said it. You're totally fine. Thank you. I really don't mean insensitivity. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the a-hole guy because that strikes really, really deep, But I also want to, you know what I mean, challenge. Sometimes I hear statements. So John clarified by saying Joe Rogan wasn't the main driving force. Obviously, numerous political and medical opinions drove the many different decisions family made. Because of my experience with my family, I'm not fond of Joe Rogan continuing to encourage ivermectin. Again, I don't know to what extent he's personally saying that's your answer, or if he's just saying here's a guy who says it. And those are, in my mind, are two very different things. Yeah, you just said, John said, although one thing Joe Rogan does that I do appreciate is he questions everything, no matter the side of politics. I've seen that, and I appreciate it. Dave just posted a article from Time. What's the date on that, Dave? What's the date on that article? But the headline is the U.S. government had Nelson Mandela on terrorist watch lists until 2008. Yeah, right there. I mean, there you go. I mean, this is just kind of what I'm talking about. Nelson Mandela. Yeah, so Steve said to broaden the topic of having a platform of speech, apply that same logic to gay rights activists 20 to 40 years ago when they were being shunned out of communities. Right. And then the question is that notion of deplatforming. In my mind, again, there ought to be a forum, even when it's and 20 to 40 years ago, extremely unpopular, right, and outside the mainstream. And but my recollection, having lived through all that, was that there were still venues and platforms from which to advocate it, but those that were on the other side of the political spectrum, generally conservatives, in that same time period, I know from experience, were at least attempting to deplatform, to take down the right for people to just say, no, this is my belief about, this element of human nature or about human rights or however you want to phrase it. So Jesse said, I think it's interesting that today, if someone says something you don't agree with, you go out of the way to cancel that person instead of looking and seeing how that affects your worldview. Yeah, amen. Andy, speaking of platforms in regards to podcasts, the majority of podcasts are distributed via RSS feeds, which are totally open and free and no one controls. Right. So if Rogan were to taken off Spotify, he'd still have a platform, just not on Spotify. Right. Which is where he was before the Spotify deal. Exactly right. I mean, he got to be Joe Rogan without Spotify. Then he cut this $100 million deal with Spotify. Um, Steve said, I'm under the impression every argument can be made into a valid one. I believe every opinion can have benefits. I think political correctness prevents any form of intelligent, creative, and productive discussion. I'm going to call you on any, Steve. I'm going to call you on any. But I will say a lot, many forms absolutely will impede the flow of ideas and information. Gidded said, cancel culture is not a new thing, folks. You're right. I agree with you. If you're wrong, we're wrong together. We used to literally kill, excommunicate, exile people whose actions, opinions we don't like. Hell yes. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. History doesn't repeat, it echoes. The difference is that now we have a way to complain. En masse, thank you. And that's a segue back to technology. You know what I mean? That what technology has done, it didn't create racism, it didn't create hatred, it didn't create evil, but it accelerated it. It also didn't create good and service and good things, but also accelerates it. You know what I mean? It's never been easier in the history of humanity to do good. You hear about somebody in a struggle across the country and you drop them $5, with a GoFundMe or something of that sort. Never been anything remotely like that. Technology. Similarly, join a lynch mob from the comfort of your own little bedroom or in the basement of your mom's house. Join a Twitter mob. Never been easier to do that. So yeah, that's right. That's right. Great comment, Get it. That's I'm giving that one an additional thumbs up. Brandon said, I listen to Rogan every so often. He definitely has had plenty of guests on both sides of the aisle and isn't afraid of confronting any of them about hot topics. Yeah, I agree. Joe Rogan has more viewers regularly than CNN. Is that real? Trick Lord. There's an article from Fortune magazine. Interesting. So who's mainstream? CNN or Joe Rogan? I don't know. In fact, I saw a headline. Just today that because the CEO of CNN just resigned due to impropriety. And apparently the article said something to the effect that CNN was planning to launch a streaming news service. And I thought, actually, it cracked me up because I kind of thought, I've actually believed for some time. There was a time 20 years, when did CNN start? 20 years ago? I don't even know when. 30? But when CNN started, it was a great source of news, and it really has become, you know, my own view of CNN is that, and to me, the tragedy of CNN is that it was this great news source around the world. Every hour there was the CNN headline news, and you could turn on the TV, and while doing something, you could get updated, and it was great. And that was also kind of pre-web. Had to be more than 20 years ago because CNN was already around 20 years ago on the web. And then somewhere in the last decade, and I actually talked to somebody that used to be an anchor at CNN, just somebody that I knew in some other business context, and had a conversation about it. And she actually said, she admitted that there was a conscious decision to pander to a left-leaning audience at CNN. That was personal conversation with me. And her argument was viewership rose when they did that. So maybe it was a good marketing ploy. The problem I have is that CNN is sort of, collapsed into a sort of black hole of leftist clickbait. It's not a place I can go to get real information, anymore. It feels like to me. I'm not playing the Donald Trump CNN is fake news, but I think there's been a fair amount of bullcrap, objectively bullcrap that I've seen and independently documented. So you lose me. Right, and I'm no fan of Fox, so I'm a radical centrist. My kingdom for just some honest reporting, just facts on the ground, man, boots on the ground. Give me some facts on the ground, and I don't need you to tell me what my opinion ought to be, nonstop. Okay, yeah, I'm worked up. Okay, let me keep going. Let me scan down. Gidded said, height is amazing. H-I-E-D-T. Yes, yes, he is. Jonathan. Did we get a link? Did somebody drop a link? Please, please, somebody drop a link to The Righteous Mind. Give me an Amazon link for Jonathan Haidt. And then also somebody find out how to say his name. All right. Braden said Science V's. Is that what is it called? Science V's or Science VS? I don't know. This podcast. Definitely a good listen. Um, Dave, I like Dave's. People are fond of hyperbole. This is the most divided America has ever been. No, I think we had a civil war. Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yes, right on. That's absolutely right. Um, Hunter said, at least both sides are spread out. I mean, in essence, it's across, it's kind of spread everywhere. There was kind of that north-south, during the Civil War. There was a geographical divide. And I agree that the dynamics are different. Steve, I don't know what the Sinclair News broadcast comparison is. Do you guys want to drop a link, Steve or Dave? Maybe drop a link for everybody's edification on that. Oh, there it is. There it is. I see it, Steve. I'm still scrolling slowly. Steve said, if not, I suggest take a look. Really think about where news is coming from and what one individual wanting a message sent can do. Andrew pointed out that in the Civil War we had in Missouri, you had neighbor against neighbor. And you do have, brothers fighting against brothers in the Civil War, depending upon, some family dynamics and things like that. But still, what a horrible, horrible thing. Okay, thank you for the link, Steve. And I can, at this point, it's just this chat it's a forum, so I'm not responsible. So there's the Deadspin YouTube thing posted by Steve, and I will give a shout out to Jonathan Haidt. I think he's one of the great thinkers of the center. Put it that way. You think about like right wing and left wing ideologists and thinkers, pundits. I think Jonathan is a pundit of the center. And I really, really like him a lot. And then there's the book. Thank you, CR, for posting the link. It's also one of the approved extra books when we read an extra book for the class. Okay, well that's cool. I mean, again, I don't care if how we're doing on the schedule. We'll get to it. I posted a little while back though, up before class. Let me find it. This is the list of, we'll run out of comments, then all we got left to do is talk a little bit more about logical fallacies. Oh, and what I was going to do is go up, because there were a bunch of comments. I got to scroll all the way up. We talked about bandwagon, which I think that whole mainstream versus not mainstream is really bandwagon. Okay. So let me see. I'll just keep, let's take a look. I'm going to go back up now, but the problem is my Discord's being, the scrolling is slow and stuttery. No, there we go. I wanted to go down to where we had talked. There were a bunch of comments that you dropped when we were talking about logical fallacies last time. But I do hate it when you're trying to scroll and it's all like jiggity. That's the technical term, is jiggity. Oh, and let me just reiterate, for the next 2 weeks, we're still remote. Did I say that at the beginning? I meant to. We're still remote for another 2 weeks. I'm just letting Omicron settle down and see what the next Greek letter is. Sorry, I'm just still, okay, there we go. Back to, what do we got to? Oh, we were on We were on, I remember, Elena, I think we were on. We had done Brandon and the Gambler's Fallacy. Okay, I'm going to hit them. I'm going to just read the comments and we'll talk about them, okay? Special pleading. And again, what was the name of the web? What was the website I had up? What was it called? Your Logical Fallacy? I don't dare scroll back down on the feed or I'll lose where I'm at. I think it was called Your Logical Fallacy as it was a good resource. I like that site. Elena said, special pleading when the goal you were trying to meet or the point you were trying to make has proven to be false. So you make an exception to your goal or you change your point so you don't sound like you were wrong. Example, Billy's interrogated by a detective, says he didn't touch the knife, but when they say they found his fingerprints on the knife, he remembers he must have, I was chopping vegetables. No, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, no, that's actually that one's also kind of galling when it actually happens. So were you home last night? No, I wasn't home. Really, it's funny because I stopped by, you know, well, what did I just say? Yeah, no, I was home. That's really funny because I stopped by last night and, and you weren't there. Well, I ended the night at home, or whatever, it's kind of like you're saying what you think they want to hear, or you're saying what you want to hear, and then you just like squirrel out of it and adjust your rationale. Ryan, ad hominem, right? Attacking. Did we talk about ad hominem? Yeah, we did. We did talk about ad hominem. That is Latin. Let me see. Isley, did we talk about appeal to nature? No, wait, appeal to, no, nature. We didn't talk about appeal to nature. Did we do it? Yeah, we did. No, we didn't do it. Sorry. I'm a mess over here. No, yeah, there was appeal to authority, and which we did discuss, and appeal to emotion. Yeah. Okay, so Isley, appeal to nature. Argument that if something is natural, then it is justified. Example, smoking marijuana isn't bad because it grows from the ground. Yeah. Or herbal medicine is better for you since it's natural. Yeah. All right. What's up next? Spencer had added tu quoque. I think that's how you say it, because it's Latin. I always want to go, what would that be? In Spanish, it would be like tu coque. I don't know. But you don't have tu quoque. A discussion technique intends to discredit the opponent's argument by attacking the person's own personal behavior. It's related to ad hominem and actions as being inconsistent with their argument, therefore accusing hypocrisy. Right. Now, this is the point. This is the point. The person might be a hypocrite. So this is not, it has no bearing. They may, in fact, be, so example from Spencer was, person A goes, stop running so many stop signs. You go, you run them all the time. Well, that has no bearing on whether you actually should, in fact, not run stop signs. Speaking of which, how many of you heard about the Tesla recall, where apparently there was a rolling stop setting that you in the code? There was a setting in the code for a rolling stop. I think that's hilarious. So that somehow got out that you could basically set it for a rolling stop, and like, no, you can't do an automatic driving system and then have a rolling stop. I guess technically breaking the law, I suppose. Nobody comes to a complete stop unless you have to. Um, yeah, Dave said we need to throw these in threads. Yeah, we'll get them though. We'll get them. I'm actually tracking them over in another document. Okay, so we did just now. Hang on, I need to mark these. We did tu quoque. We did bandwagon. We did appeal to nature. And again, I just want to say this so we understand ourselves, each other. The point of a logical fallacy isn't that the logical fallacy proves you wrong. If you engage in a logical fallacy, you might still be right. Like if I'm a hypocrite, you know, like I remember my parents who smoked telling me not to smoke. Well, I looked at that as a kid and I just thought, well, they ought to know. Was it hypocritical? Yes. Were they right? Yes. You know what I mean? Being a hypocrite doesn't make you wrong. Making a bad argument doesn't make you wrong. Okay? So, yeah. And again, two quoteways very related, I think very similarly related to ad hominem. Begging the question, Matthew, making a circular argument in which you already assume the conclusion is true and include it in the beginning of your argument as a premise. Do you have we have an example of that? Because, let me just see. Again, I am marking stuff in my doc. Ambiguity, using ambiguity to mislead or represent the truth. Max said, you're never wrong if you're ambiguous. An example might be a high school student abuses a hall pass and spends the entirety of class skipping because he was allowed to be. Oh, that's classic, man. I've had, I raised a bunch of teenagers. Well, you said I could, yeah, well, you said I didn't, like, why did you punch your brother in the face? Well, you said I didn't have to put up with his crap. Yes. Yeah. Where am I at here? Ambiguity. So again, the whole point of a logical fallacy is that it doesn't have any bearing per se on your conclusion. You might be right, you might be wrong, only that your logical fallacy fails to establish the conclusion that you'd like the other side to have. Okay, is everybody clear on what a logical fallacy, does to you? It makes you incapable of persuasion, of an actual logical argument that leads to that conclusion. You may still be right, and that's the problem. That's the difficulty, Okay, my personal one, Daniel. Personal incredulity. I like this one a lot because you found something difficult to understand or unaware how it works. You made out like it's not true. Okay. Somebody get me a picture. Drop it in the chat. Somebody give me a picture of a talking head doing the personal incredulity face. Okay? My personal favorite, Tucker Carlson. I also don't like Tucker. But Tucker does this thing where he's like, okay, Tucker, we get that you're like, are you kidding me? That's personal incredulity. Now, he may be right or he may be wrong, but that's not an argument. Okay? The personal incredulity is not an argument. Example. My ex's parents don't understand the physiology behind depression. That happens. So they claim depression isn't real and happiness is 100% a choice. She would explain it to them and they would tell her, stop being sad, just be happy. Like, wow, I hadn't thought of that before, bro. Yeah, right? No, that's a little bit like that. It's a little bit like that. So I'd love to see your personal favorite personal incredulity face. Again, for me, Tucker Carlson is the master of the personal incredulity logical fallacy. There's a related one, which is the sort of the condescending amusement, where you're just like, oh, okay. That's a form of personal incredulity that I refer to as the condescending amusement. John mentioned Texas sharpshooter, which I think we had talked about, and great use of that graph. Let me see. CR had said, I think that appeal to authority can work if you have your data to back it up. That's not appeal to authority. That's appeal to data. If an authority generates data and you believe the data, That's not appeal to authority. Appeal to authority is, my brother-in-law is a medical doctor, and he said you can eat roach killer and it'll cure COVID. That's appeal to authority. Okay, he may or may not be right. Oh, Dave, the concussion studies funded by the NFL. Boom. Yeah, that's up again. This is up in the chat from 2 days ago. I'm just trying to review the stuff we didn't get to. Let me just see. I'm still marking. So there's a little delay because I'm marking the ones we've already talked about. No True Scotsman, Frozen Havoc. Be like saying yes, you were talking about if you say no, I'm gonna. So what Havoc had said was it would be like me saying Southerners like biscuits and gravy. My friend says I'm from the South. I don't like biscuits and gravy. And then if I say like all true Southerners like biscuits and gravy, then you're committing the no true Scotsman fallacy, and that's less of a loaded one. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more like um, you're part of some. It does have to do with part of a clan, citing the Scotsman thing. Um, yeah, so Shaun said no true Scotsman happens frighteningly often in fandoms of just about everything. Like, whoa, you call yourself a Star Wars, fan and you don't, blah blah blah, right? Or what kind of a Rams fan are you, right? That sort of a nobody who's really a true whatever would behave like that. Therefore, you shouldn't behave like that. It's an appeal to group identity, I think, as much as anything. Um, oh, and then Star Wars showed up. That comment was there back then. Um, John said his dad uses no true Scotsman on him because his political beliefs differ from his slightly. Yeah, exactly. You had Thanksgiving dinner with a Republican? What kind of a Democrat are you? It's not an argument. It's not an argument. First of all, in my example, it's like you ought to have a dinner with folks that whatever. Um, all right. I'm kind of just scanning, and we hit a little bit about straw man, and we're down to the bottom. Slippery slope. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm scrolling all the way back to the bottom for the last 5 minutes. Do you feel like, by the way, whoa, is audio back? When was that? 10 minutes ago, Dave said he lost audio. We're good. Okay, thanks. All right, thanks, man. Um, thank you for the link, Jesse. Back to the link on the site. So Silo said, I'd like to add to the appeal to nature discussion. As a trans person, I get told that I'm doing something wrong because trans is unnatural. The argument of what is natural makes no sense because you drive a car today. And I agree with you, Silo. Very unnatural. Cars are very unnatural, right? And right, so that I think is a classic example of an appeal to nature argument, right? Um, Dave said, uh, yeah, and then what Dave was doing was actually, and what I'm kind of avoiding in every instance wherever possible, is double clicking down on the argument per se, because then we're going to all double click and we're just going to go there, and that's what it'll be about. I'm still operating at more of a meta level. Okay. And that's true of, I think that's, generally true. You know what I mean? I'm not getting into specific things as much as possible as I am about the meta level things surrounding it. Okay. Here's what we have. Okay. We did know True Scotsman. Here's the new list. Are you ready? Let me just drop the modified list. Hang on. I am text editing right now. But the result will be a new list that we can talk about, and we can finish up next time. We're okay. I'm not worried about it. long as we're thinking and enjoying the discussion. Where are we at here? Okay, here's what's left. Oops. Okay, these are the topics that are left. Let's just hit one or two. Just if a few of you brave souls, especially if you haven't, done much. If you've been lurking, this is your time. Go hit one of these on the your logical fallacy is. I got at least somebody typing, so. And by the way, I hope I could launch a survey, but I hope that this whole exercise has been, you know, interesting, at least somewhat thought provoking. Um, get you thinking. Just get you. If I can get everybody to second guess their positions a little bit, I think that's kind of a step on the path to enlightenment. Instead of just being so steadfast. Oh, Shaun, a loaded question asked if an outfit. Yeah, questions you never ever answer with any partner. If an outfit makes me look fat, does this make me look fat? Yes. Yeah, Steve. No, it's not the outfit. Excellent, Steve. Good luck with your relationship, Steve. Um, no, that's the fallback. Does this make me look fat? No, it's not the outfit. Um, Anecdotal example. A dog bit someone once, therefore all dogs are vicious killers. Yeah, that's a good one. Um, oh, yeah, loaded questions. Interviews by a politician. Right, right. Or a by or of. I mean, the reporters do this all the time when they're trying to do gotcha questions. Isn't it true, Senator? You know, and there's loaded question. Um, I wanted to just say one thing about anecdotal, and then we can wrap up because we're about at the time. Um, Here's a loaded question. It's a classic one, right? It's an ambiguous question, but it's a loaded question that there's no right answer to. Matthew mentioned, intended to make you sound guilty regardless of your answer. Do you still beat your wife? You know, is an extreme example maybe of a loaded question. Um, Let me see. This is my statement about anecdotes. The plural of anecdote is not data. You give me 3 stories from neighbors, that's not data. And I think this challenge, and one of the reasons you have to have stats. Do you have to have stats in your program? I hope you do. Not because I want you to suffer, which I do, but Matthew, you should. Stats. I hope so. But I remember I sat through when I was on faculty at BYU, sat in a stats class just taught by friend in the college who was in the stats department, and he said the purpose of this class is to help you read a newspaper. And I thought that for like an introductory stats class, I thought that was great, to help you to read a newspaper, right? So that your whole world is not the mailman said, or my neighbor said, or my mom said. That's that kind of little flow of, it creates a limited world view that doesn't understand that there's a bigger sort of population of data out there. And the plural of anecdote is not data. So, hey, we're out of time. Um, we'll come back. And I think, Dave, let's remember when we come back, let's come back to burden of proof. Um, and I'll mark my list as well for the ones we've already hit just in that last couple minutes. But We'll come back and wrap up Burden of Proof. That will be on what, Tuesday next week? Whatever day of the week that's going to be, the 8th. All right, friends. Stay safe. Love y'all. Be safe. Be strong. Be well. Appreciate the discussion, man. This is great. Great comments. Love it. So, all right. I'll see you next week, and we'll still be remote. Still remote.